Is it true that smoking can contribute to hair loss, male pattern baldness? In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the science behind this controversial topic. I'm going to give you a preview. The answer is probably yes. And furthermore, if you combine smoking with another unhealthy lifestyle factor, your chances of getting pattern baldness, hair loss, increases sixfold. Stay tuned to find out what that is. So, smoking and hair loss is a debate that goes back quite some time, but over the past few years, over the past decade or so, we've had lots of research coming in. And taken together, this body of research is pretty convincing that smoking, yes, it can contribute to male pattern baldness, androgenetic alopecia. But before we look at the clinical data, let's first have a look at some of the possible biological mechanisms to which smoking can contribute to hair loss. First of all, smoking causes your blood vessels to constrict. Now, constricted vessels mean restricted blood flow, which is the exact opposite of what you want happening in your scalp. Recall that minoxidil is a vasodilator. It widens the vessels and allows more blood to flow. And less blood flow means less oxygen. Now, second, tobacco smoke damages DNA. This can interfere with a regular hair growth cycle and ultimately lead to miniaturization. Thirdly, it generates free radicals. These are basically atoms with an unpaired or free electron. Now, these atoms are inherently unstable and they have a very short lifespan. But as they travel through the body, they look for an electron to pair with and they collide with healthy tissues, and this causes damage. Now, some researchers believe that the free radicals generated by inhaling tobacco smoke can contribute to hair follicles entering a premature catagen phase. Fourth, inflammation of the hair follicles. And fifth, hormonal changes. Sixth, the long-term accumulation of toxic smoke components in the follicles. Now, unfortunately, the follicles are very good at accumulating smoke ingredients. They're so good, actually, that researchers routinely use hair samples as a measure of one's exposure to tobacco smoke. In 2000, researchers out of Italy published this very interesting mouse study. The title was Induction of Alopecia in Mice Exposed to Cigarette Smoke. So they took a group of mice and for 6 months exposed them to cigarette smoke 6 hours a day. After this time, most of the mice in the group developed hair loss and gray hair. The researchers also observed extensive skin atrophy, thinning of the subcutaneous layer, and a reduced number of hair follicles. Now, obviously, a disadvantage of this study was that the amount of smoke that the animals were exposed to was massive when you adjust for their mass. But still, the results are very suggestive and suggest that similar processes might just be happening in humans. Now, the first study on the relationship between tobacco and hair loss was published out of the UK in 1996. The researchers looked at 606 adult patients who visited a surgical outpatient department. This was a purely observational study, and the researchers found that smokers were almost twice as likely to have baldness compared to non-smokers. Another study out of Taiwan in 2007 recruited a slightly larger sample size of over 700 men. This was a representative sample from the general population, and all men were older than 40 years. Now, like in the UK study, smokers were more likely to have moderate or severe hair loss. And looking at all smokers, including those who had smoked in the past but quit by the time of the study, their risk of baldness was 60% higher. For those who were currently smoking, and particularly for those who were currently smoking more than 20 cigarettes a day, the risk was 86% more, nearly double. 5 years ago, we got another study out of Italy. This was more comprehensive and looked at the interactions between smoking and being overweight as they're related to hair loss. Now, unsurprisingly, the researchers first noted that smoking correlated with BMI, body mass index. In other words, smokers also tended to be overweight. And for those subjects that were both overweight, i.e. had a BMI larger than 25, and also smoked, these subjects were almost 6 times more likely to have androgenetic alopecia. So let me repeat that. Being overweight and smoking at the same time makes you 6 times more likely to have androgenetic alopecia compared to somebody who is a non-smoker and has a normal body weight. In a similar vein, a 2016 paper out of Korea reported that men with androgenetic alopecia had higher rates of smoking as well as cardiovascular disease, particularly hypertension, stroke, and metabolic syndrome. This was a very large study with almost 2,000 participants. And a few years ago, we got this very interesting twin study out of the US. 92 identical male twins had their heads photographed and completed an extensive lifestyle questionnaire. And the results were fascinating. The longer the twins had been smoking, the more likely they were to have frontal hair loss. Now, statistically, this correlation was very strong. Interestingly, frontal baldness was also positively correlated with the presence of dandruff, though not as strong. Smoking was also positively correlated to vertex hair loss, but not as strong as in the frontal area. Now, this was a fascinating study that found various other factors that may play a role in causing or preventing hair loss. These included such things as drinking coffee, exercising, wearing hats, etc. I've linked to the study in the description for those of you who'd like to have a look in more detail. Now, while the results of these studies are typically very highly statistically significant and taken together, they're very difficult to explain away, we should note that there have been studies that did not find any link between hair loss and smoking. Having said that, these studies that didn't find any link, they kind of tend to be smaller, and they also often include women. The largest study of this kind that failed to find a link came to us from Turkey a few years ago. The study reviewed 419 men who were referred to an outpatient clinic. The researchers found a statistically significant link between hypertension and hair loss, but no difference in smoking habits between the men with and without hair loss. So what's our take? Now, on its own, it's unlikely that smoking is going to make you lose all your hair. Most likely, smoking exacerbates hair loss in those who have a genetic predisposition. In other words, if you're genetically predisposed to hair loss, smoking will only make things worse. But another consideration, perhaps even more important, is that smoking is typically going to be linked to other aspects of poor health. So if you're smoking, you're probably not going to be exercising, or you're not going to be exercising as much as you should. And your diet's probably not going to be up to par, and you might be overweight, and you might have high blood pressure or diabetes or metabolic syndrome or whatever. Now, these are obviously just trends. You know, you might be a smoker and you might be amazingly healthy in all other aspects of your life. Your diet might be amazing and all that, but that's a statistical trend. And the evidence shows that when you combine smoking with these other unhealthy lifestyles, and particularly poor diet, your risk for hair loss really increases substantially, and it's not even subtle. Unfortunately, many guys, they overlook these things, and you often get a mentality of, you know, what is the best pill? Give me the best pill. Give me the best topical that I can just put on my hair and just make it come back. But if you're really seriously committed about reversing your hair loss, then a holistic outlook and a healthy lifestyle is essential. For those of you who'd like to learn more about this topic, in the description below, I've linked to this article, this review article published in the International Journal of Trichology, which served as the major source for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching today, and take care.